Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again for the second of our GPLT virtual variety nights. Tonight, what we have in store for you is a reading of Geordie Mann's play Bronte, The World Without. So joining me today are Davin Campbell, Natasha Hunt, and Wade Fleming to read this lovely piece. It was published last year and was first produced in 2018 in Toronto. Without further ado, here is Bronte, The World Without.
In a room in an older house, the house sits on top of a hill with a graveyard at the foot of the property. The room itself has two large windows without curtains. There's a bookshelf filled with books. On one wall is a working fireplace, tables with various trinkets on them, and a framed landscape painting. Against the other wall is a sofa with a cushion. There's also a rocking chair in the middle of the room with tables and chairs around it. On the table are 3 lit candles, 3 sewing boxes, and 3 writing desks. The room appears to be in order, but should feel lived in. The space functions as a dining room, a living room, a drawing room within this house. The sound of a clock tolls through the house. Movement 1, evening. Charlotte, 29, sits at a table. She sews, holding her work close to her face. Emily, 27, sits on the sofa staring into the night. Anne, 25, sits in the rocking chair sewing quickly. All 3 women are dressed for bed. Emily puts her sewing down, grabs a candle, and then leaves the room without acknowledging the other 2. Anne puts her needle into the sewing box, and she gathers Emily's sewing and tries to collect Charlotte's sewing, but Charlotte resists.
I can put it away myself.
We've been keeping the sewing upstairs.
Why not keep it in the basket?
I've been working on some larger pieces. She doesn't like it when I leave it on the floor.
That's why we keep it in the... Where is the basket?
Charlotte looks around the room.
Upstairs. It's been easier to just have everything
Fine.
go
Do what you like.
Ow!
Charlotte hands Anne her sewing. Anne heads for the door, and as she does, she stubs her toe.
Ow, 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 ow!
Anne, shh!
I'm trying, but ow, my toe!
Anne leaves limping. Emily enters carrying a tray with a teapot and 3 teacups. She places the tray on the table and pours tea into the cups. Emily hands Charlotte a cup. Charlotte sips and then makes a face.
It's weak.
We don't have very much left. Do you want me to steep it longer?
Anne enters.
No, it's fine.
Is there enough for me?
Yes, but there's only enough left for 1 more cup.
Make sure you pour me a full cup.
Why wouldn't I pour you a full cup?
Sometimes you give me less than you're supposed to.
When?
Sometimes you never just give me
No,
exactly
I never.
what I want.
Can we begin?
They look at each other and sit at the table.
Well,
Emily
You
and
go.
Anne exchange looks.
You go.
No, you.
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 Emily!
Anne?
will one of you please just...
All right. Tabby won't be returning.
She won't be returning at all, or she won't be returning...
She isn't well enough to work yet. Her brother wrote to us last week. They don't know when she'll be able to come back.
She should have stayed here with us. We could have cared for her.
She wanted to be with her family.
We are her family.
No, we are her employers. You're still taking on her duties?
Martha's been here once a week, but mainly, yes, it's been me. Anne's been helping since she returned.
I keep asking her to let me do more. She hardly lets me do anything.
You create more work for me.
No,
Yes, you're ironing. You burnt my dress.
that was an accident.
It's easier if I just do it myself.
What have you been doing these past few weeks if you're not helping her?
I've been looking after Papa.
How long has he had the cough?
A week or two.
You called for the doctor?
We did.
Emily didn't want me to.
I thought we should have waited a little longer before we call the
I thought he was
doctor.
doing poorly enough to call.
You haven't seen any improvement?
His fever's gone down. He's just weak.
He's had very little appetite. He hasn't had a full meal in days.
That's why he's weak. He needs to eat.
I've tried to get him to eat. He won't let me.
You have to try harder.
You try forcing him to do something he doesn't want to do.
You have to insist.
I do. He refuses. It takes all my strength not to just take the spoon and shove it down his throat myself.
Anne!
Everything's a challenge with him, and he's been in a miserable mood.
Have you heard from Branwell?
No, has he written to you?
No. Have you heard from him?
Why would I hear from him?
The two of you used to see each other every day.
Not every day.
You saw one another for suppers.
We took meals at different times.
You wrote me and said you and Bran spent all your time together.
When he first arrived at the Robinsons, yes.
Oh, dear.
But that didn't last. Before long, we would go for months without talking to each other. He mainly talked. I hardly saw him.
I'll write to him and ask when he'll be visiting next. What?
Nothing.
You don't think I should ask him when he intends to come?
I don't think he'll be visiting anytime soon.
Did he say something to make you think that he wouldn't want to come?
I told you. He hardly spoke to me. He wouldn't even see me off the day I left.
Well, did you do something to upset him or?
No, Charlotte, I didn't do anything. If you want an explanation, ask him yourself.
Anne heads for the door.
Anne,
Anne stops.
What? What?
sit. Sit.
Can't we do this in the morning?
The purpose of us speaking tonight was to.
I thought the purpose was for us to be together.
That was part of it, but more pressing is.
Anne. Oh.
Emily
She
indicates
listens to
for
you.
Anne to join them. Anne walks into the table and decides not to sit with her sisters. She walks to the rocking chair and plops herself down.
She listens to you, but with me, she won't even.
I can hear you.
Well, you won't come when I call.
I'm not a dog, Charlotte.
I'm not saying you're a dog. Just
Emily looks towards the door.
how much do we have?
Emily opens
That's
a small
all?
notebook, then hands it to Charlotte.
That's all.
Yes,
What about Papa's salary?
that's with the salary.
You're certain?
Yes, we counted everything.
This is with Auntie's inheritance?
No,
Why wouldn't you include that?
that money is for our future.
And she only left us a very small amount.
She would never forgive us if we used it now for the household.
Well, there doesn't seem to be enough.
Because there isn't.
This will hardly get us through until the end of winter. How much were you able to save from the Robinsons?
It's there.
How much?
15 pounds.
Most of what we have is Anne's.
We've used as little as possible since I've returned.
And you? How much were you able to save from Brussels?
Well, after paying for my classes, books, paper, quills, postage, my travel home,
But they paid you when you started to teach there.
teaching meant I was there longer than we had originally
Did you save
planned.
anything?
A few pounds,
How much is a few?
3 pounds.
Emily and Anne look
I
at each
tried
other.
to save more. It wasn't possible. They didn't pay me enough to. Have you told Papa?
No, not yet.
We didn't want to worry him.
And we wanted to wait until you returned.
Why? So I could be the one to tell him.
So we could decide together how to best proceed.
What about Branwell? We need to tell him at least,
Why?
considering he's the one of us who's actually employed.
We'll see how long that lasts.
Anne!
What? He's been fired from every post he's ever had.
Bran needs to know. I'll include it in my letter to him. I'll ask him how much he's saved since starting at the Robinsons.
He hasn't saved anything.
We don't know that.
He's never been good with money.
He's been good at making it.
No, he's been good at spending it.
Maybe he can send something in the meantime. Something small, even to...
Emily takes a notebook from Charlotte and flips to a new page and then hands it back to Charlotte.
Coffee, tea, beef, sugar, salt, flour, oats, potatoes, beans, peas, cabbage, celery, butter, raisins, and bacon.
We're running low on all of it.
We don't need coffee.
Papa drinks
Charlotte
it.
grabs for a pencil.
He shouldn't. It's hard on his system.
He asks us to serve it when he has visitors.
And Bran would want some if he were here.
We don't need bacon.
Yes.
It's not necessary for us to have bacon.
I love bacon.
Charlotte crosses bacon
Don't-
off the list.
We don't need beef.
Papa needs it. The doctor said he needs it for his health.
He hates the taste of meat and it's too hard for him to digest.
He needs to keep up his strength.
Well, if he isn't eating,
Perhaps we can buy a small portion for Papa. The three of us can do without.
yes, we'll buy beans instead.
Charlotte writes in her notebook and rolls her eyes.
We don't need cabbage and celery. Cabbage seems to be of more use to us, yes?
Yes.
Charlotte makes another
Yes.
note, and she sees candles on the table and blows them out.
What? It's an expense.
That's hardly going to do anything.
We have to start somewhere. We can dismiss Martha.
No,
She's only here once a week.
I can't take care of this entire house on my own.
I thought Anne was helping.
She is, but not enough to really make
I
a
help.
difference.
I'm
I help.
simply looking for a way to,
It's too much for one person.
well, something has to change. Something has to.
Charlotte rubs her
Well-
eyes.
We'll let Martha go this week.
But she's so sweet. She's my...
That's
My
not a
friend.
reason to pay her to do something we can do ourselves.
Charlotte looks at them.
You didn't tell me this has gotten so...
Charlotte and Emily
What?
and Anne see each other.
You tell her.
No, you.
Emily.
I already told her about that
Tell
other
me what.
Papa. He's losing his sight.
Does he need new glasses?
No, it's not that.
Did you ask the doctor? What did he say when he
He's going blind.
blind?
There's a surgery, a procedure. It could help restore his sight.
Anne goes to the writing desk, pulls out a newspaper clipping, and hands it to Charlotte.
Fully?
No, not fully.
Almost fully.
It would make a difference. He would be able to walk on his own, read on his own. He wouldn't need help getting up and down from the pulpit during services.
Has Papa seen this?
He's the one who showed it to us.
And because of one article, he thinks it will actually.
Charlotte, he fell.
When?
A few weeks ago.
After services.
He fell down the stairs in front of the entire congregation. He was mortified.
Why did you wait until now to tell me?
He asked us not to tell you or Bran. He didn't want to cause a scene.
Was he hurt?
Yes.
He cut his head, sprained his wrist. He was shaking for days.
He thinks he may lose his position if he doesn't have the surgery.
He's given years of his life to this community. They wouldn't do that.
It doesn't matter. If he can't see, they'll bring in another priest to replace him, and there won't be any need for him here. He would lose his job.
And we would lose our home.
We wouldn't. They would find some way for us to stay here. For Papa to stay, certainly.
How? We have no ownership here. If he's dismissed, we'll be forced to leave.
And we would have nowhere to go. We can't afford bacon, never mind a home to.
All
to
right,
keep in.
all right. Where would he have the surgery done?
In Manchester.
That's a day's journey.
He's eager to go.
How soon would he have to leave?
As soon as we can pay for it.
How much is it going to cost?
£10.
10 pounds? We don't even know if it will be successful.
We don't have any reason to think it won't be.
We'd have to stay in Manchester while he recovered. That will add to the cost.
We know. We'd want you to take him.
I just returned.
You wouldn't have to go until we had the money.
This is all so. I was hoping to be here for a while, to be at home with Papa, with the two of you before I. How are we going to.
What if we sold some things to help with the cost of everything?
What would we sell?
I don't know. Books.
We're not selling our books.
Why not? We've read them all. We can take them out from the library if we want to read them again.
Papa would never let us sell.
He doesn't have to know.
He would figure it out when he came looking for something to read.
We have furniture. Some pieces in the kitchen. We could.
Those pieces were Mama's.
She isn't using them.
Anne!
For goodness sake.
She isn't. Mama would want them to go to good use. We have dishes, serving plates, cutlery.
Those are the only possessions of hers we have left.
No, we have her jewelry.
We're not selling Mama's things.
The piano, then. We could make a fortune off it.
No. It was a gift from Papa.
Think of how much we could make if we just.
I play it. I play it every day. We're not selling the piano.
I don't hear either of you contributing.
How do you think it would look if we started selling off every item we have? We don't want the congregation to think Papa was in such need that
What about Branwell's paintings? We could sell those, couldn't we? How much could we make for this one?
Anne goes to the painting above the fireplace.
how would we even go about selling his paintings? Brand's the only one of us who knows anything about.
He could help. Perhaps he could even paint us a couple of new ones.
If we want something new, Charlotte should paint them. You're as good a painter as he is. Both of you are.
No, we're not skilled like he is. When I write him, I'll inform him of our situation, and
We shouldn't rely on him.
We've helped him on countless occasions. We've saved everything we could to send him to school.
We should never have sent him to school in the first place. He's not even using his training.
at least he's working.
As a tutor, not as a painter.
It takes time to develop a career of that.
And in that time, we may freeze and starve to death.
We won't freeze.
You don't know that.
And we're not going to.
What about our school then?
We never found enough students to make it work.
Couldn't we try again?
In the time it would take us to set everything up, we'd run out of money. The cost alone of turning this house into a school.
We could use our inheritance.
That money is for our future.
For our future. Yes. But wouldn't Auntie feel that turning our home into a school for girls is the very best use of her money?
Papa can hardly stand us in the house, never mind a house full of girls he doesn't know.
What was the point of sending you to Brussels if all you were going to
Anne,
You went there to learn new skills, to be able to come back here to teach.
I know why I went.
So, if we looked at opening the school again, maybe we could.
Anne, it won't happen.
But if we tried, maybe we could.
Anne, I'll put an ad in the paper
for
for me to be a governess.
I thought you wanted to be at home.
We can't afford for me to be at home.
We need you to take Papa for his surgery.
And first, we need money so he can afford to have the surgery at all.
I could look for something.
No, you can't.
I could try.
You would be miserable.
So would you.
Emily, every time you leave, you get sick.
Not every time.
Yes.
Yes. Every single time. You can barely walk out the front door without getting homesick. I'll put an ad in the paper this week.
So will I.
Both of you. What about the house?
We need the money more than you need the help.
Can't you teach?
There aren't any teaching positions in the area.
You're sure?
Yes. I sent letters to whomever I could. There's nothing.
Can't you return to Brussels? The Hegers would gladly have you back.
No, I don't think they would.
Yes, Monsieur Heger would want you to go back. You were Monsieur Heger's favorite student.
I can't go back.
Have they found someone to replace you?
Even if they haven't, there's nothing for me there.
There's a job for you there.
No, I can't go back. I can't spend another moment at that school, in that place. I don't want to teach.
Why would you dream of opening a school of your own if you don't want to do it?
Because it was something we could have done together. Something that could have been ours. We wouldn't have to leave home. We wouldn't have to work for another family and be treated like servants. The Sidgwicks, expected me to care for their children and clean the house and tend the kitchen. I was governess, maid, and all. Once their son hit me in the head with a Bible and I was the one reprimanded.
The Robinson son used to force me to go outside with him to hunt for nests. When he found one, his greatest pleasure was ripping the legs and wings off every little bird he could find. I've never met a more despicable child in all my life.
I hate children.
I hate children.
You love children.
No, children love me. There's a difference.
Isn't there anything else we could do?
What? What else could we do?
What if you receive a response?
Then we'll take the work.
Both of you?
Emily, we can't refuse it. Not now.
And if neither of you receives a response, what then?
They look at each other. Interlude. Charlotte, Emily, and Anne tidy the room. Emily collects her tray, teacups, and the 2 candles, and she leaves. Charlotte looks through their book collection. She decides what to give away, and then she hands the books to Anne, who leaves. Charlotte looks at the trinkets on the table. Anne enters and takes the painting down from above the fireplace. Charlotte hands some of the trinkets to Anne, who leaves with the trinkets and painting. Charlotte notices a paper sticking out of Emily's writing desk. She opens the desk and looks through it, finding a small notebook that she reads. Emily enters. She sees Charlotte reading her book and rushes to her, grabbing the notebook from Charlotte and running out of the room. Anne enters. She starts to tidy the room. Charlotte joins her. Emily enters. Charlotte moves towards Emily to say something, but Emily quickly moves away from her and leaves. Charlotte and Anne reorganize the chairs around the table. They both grab their sewing. They sit and work. Movement 2. Evening, 9 months later. Charlotte, 30, sits at a sewing table. Anne, 26, sits at the rocking chair, and they are dressed for bed. Anne stands. She pours tea into 3 cups. She hands Charlotte a cup, takes one for herself, contemplates sitting beside Charlotte, but decides to sit back in the rocking chair. The front door of the house is opened and closed quickly. Charlotte and Anne look at each other. Emily, 28, enters wearing a day dress and a cloak.
Where have you been?
I needed to walk.
You already went out this afternoon.
I needed to walk again.
Emily goes to her writing desk. She opens to make sure nothing is missing, and then slams it down.
I'm going to bed.
You never go to bed this early.
I'm tired.
Emily.
Good night.
Emily heads for the door.
We agreed to speak about Branwell.
We can speak about Branwell in the morning.
He'll be awake in the morning.
He's been here a week already and hasn't risen before noon since he arrived.
See, we'll have plenty of time to talk about him tomorrow.
Charlotte runs to the door before Emily can get to it, preventing her from leaving. Emily tries to sneak past Charlotte.
Charlotte.
Charlotte prevents Emily from going.
Enough.
Emily tries to sneak back Charlotte again.
Let me go.
Emily pushes Charlotte out of the way.
How long are you going to carry on like this? She's barely spoken to me in days.
I know.
You should have thought about that before you decided to
I
root
didn't
around
decide anything. I found it. And now you'd rather hide in your room?
I'm not hiding.
Instead of discussing your brother's future, discussing together how we can help him?
He doesn't want our help.
He doesn't know what he wants.
He shouldn't have come here.
And where do you propose he should have gone instead?
To stay with a friend or anyone else.
He's in no condition to stay with anyone else.
He's in no condition to stay here either.
If you had just told us, warned us that he was...
He wasn't like this at the Robinsons. He wasn't stumbling around, drunk, all hours of the night.
How could you not tell us about... I can't even bring myself to say her name. How could you not?
I didn't know.
Anne, you lived in the same house as them.
And they were careful, cautious. I had my suspicions. Of course I did. But I never thought they were actually...
How could he do this? They were his employers. She was his... He has to apologize.
To who?
To Mr. Robinson. He should be begging that man for forgiveness, offering him anything he can.
What does Bran have to offer him?
He could work without pay.
Branwell must never come into contact with the Robinsons again.
Something has to be done.
He needs to stay in bed. He needs to recover.
Recover from drinking night after night?
Well, if we let him drink in the house like I suggested, then I
No.
do believe
He's not drinking in the house.
he's going to drink one way or another. We might as well let him.
If he's so intent on destroying himself, he can do that on his own outside of the house.
He needs a doctor.
He needs time. He's grieving.
Grieving?
I believe him when he says he loves her. He said they intended to marry.
She's already married, Emily, to someone else.
She was going to leave her husband.
Do you really think a woman like that, who would behave in that way in her own home, would leave her husband for a man without a single penny to his name? She was never going to leave him. And now our lives are ruined.
They hear a loud noise from above them.
What was that?
Emily goes to the door as if to leave.
No, Anne, go see what it is.
Why do I always have to be the one?
Anne!
Anne looks at them, then leaves. Emily goes to follow.
Where are you going?
With Anne.
Emily.
What?
This distance between us. I can't stand it. I've forgiven you. Why can't you forgive me?
Forgiven me? For what?
For reading my letter.
I made myself perfectly clear. If you continue to write to Monsieur Heger, I would open any letter I found in the house. You had no business writing to him.
I had to try to reach him again to see if he at least...
He asked you not to contact him.
Reading that letter from him was the most excruciating. I needed to know if he... Emily, please.
He's married. He has a wife and a family.
I know.
He has a respectable position at a respected school. You shouldn't have allowed yourself to think that anything would come of it.
I know. I thought that he... I know how foolish it is.
Do you?
Yes. But I couldn't. I had to write to him again. I had to know if there was any chance of our friendship.
Friendship?
I had to know if there was any way for me to keep him in my life. To keep him. He was so kind to me.
Many people have been kind to you, Charlotte.
Not like him. He took such care with me.
You were his student.
The way he spoke to me, the way he treated me, the gifts he gave me, he favored me over everyone else at that school.
That doesn't mean he had affectionate
Then
desire
what?
to...
What does it mean? You don't know what it's like to feel that way for another.
I can imagine.
Imagining's not the same.
I'm going to check on Anne.
I can't stand the idea of losing you too.
You haven't lost me.
Certainly feels that way.
Charlotte, what you read, these are some of my most private, they were never meant for anyone to read.
How could I not read them? They're too extraordinary not to.
They aren't for you. They aren't for anyone other than myself.
What was it?
Papa, he fell.
Again?
Is he all right?
He missed the edge of the bed. He needs to have the surgery.
We don't have enough saved yet to be able to afford.
We've been saving for almost a year.
And we still don't have enough.
We'll use our inheritance then.
Our inheritance is hardly enough to pay for
What
the
were you
travel.
two fighting about?
It was nothing,
It was nothing.
Charlotte.
Emily's upset with me for finding some of her writing, and I'm trying to apologize, but she refuses to.
I don't hear an actual apology, Charlotte.
You don't let anyone read your writing.
I didn't let her read it. She took it without asking.
I didn't take anything. I stumbled across it, and
No, you were looking. You always have to know everything.
that isn't true.
How many times have you been behind that door listening to our conversations? Private conversations that are
What did you
between
write?
myself.
She's written some of the most.
Stop it.
Emily, your work is stunning. It's not like any poetry I've ever read.
It's not poetry. There are a few rhymes, that's all.
Your words, they're haunting,
Enough.
filled with the deepest sense of.
Please, I'm begging you. Can we forget you ever found them? That you ever. These are my most. They were never meant to be read.
I want to
They
know
were
what
never
you're
meant
talking
to be.
about.
Have you not been listening? They're not for you, for either of you.
Emily's breathing changes.
You should never have.
Emily grabs her chest.
You will not read anymore. You will respect my privacy. Do you hear me? You will not read anymore.
I'll get a cloth.
Anne leaves. Emily stumbles and falls to the ground. She breathes heavily. Charlotte goes to her.
It's all right. You're all right.
Emily struggles to breathe.
Take a breath. Can you do that like this?
Charlotte takes a breath. Emily tries to copy her. Charlotte moves behind Emily, holding her tightly, and Emily can feel her breathing.
Again, with me.
Emily takes another breath. Anne enters with a small basin and cloth, and she wrings out the cloth.
Calm. Calm.
Anne places the cloth on Emily's forehead.
Good.
Emily takes the cloth from Anne. She holds it tightly against her face, and her breath slowly becomes steadier.
Do you want to stand?
We should call for the doctor.
No, we can't afford.
If you need someone, we'll find a way.
No, no. It's.
Emily takes a deep breath.
It will pass.
Do you want some tea?
Emily
Something
shakes
to
her
eat?
head. Emily
Are you
shakes her
sure
head.
We have honey cake left from when Mr. Nichols came to visit.
All right.
Charlotte, do you want some?
Yes, yes, bring whatever's left.
Anne leaves. Emily
Slowly.
tries to stand. Emily moves
Slowly.
slowly and sits at the sofa and grabs her chest. Her breathing hasn't fully normalized yet, and Charlotte watches Emily closely. Anne enters with a tray, a large plate covered by a cloth, and 3 smaller plates.
Don't tell Papa if we finish it. Honey cake is his favorite.
We can blame it on Bran.
Yes, let's blame it on Bran.
Anne places the tray on the table, removes the cloth, and reveals a small section of cake.
Oh, I thought we had more.
Looks like Bran got to it after all.
There's hardly enough for 3 slices.
Give Emily a larger piece.
I don't need a larger piece.
I'll take it then.
I was being polite. I'll take the larger piece.
Anne cuts the cake and gives each of them a slice. Emily immediately begins to devour it. Charlotte and Anne watch her, and they laugh.
Slow down, you'll choke.
Emily looks at them and slows down, and they hear a noise from the hallway.
Papa?
Anne stands and goes to the door and opens it slightly. They hear someone belch loudly. Anne closes the door quickly.
No, not Papa.
They hear the front door in the house being opened and slammed shut. They breathe a sigh of relief. Anne sits at the table and takes a bite of her cake.
It's too dry.
I don't think so.
Emily, who has already finished her piece, reaches for Anne's plate and starts to eat her cake.
Neither does she.
Anne goes to her writing desk and pulls out a notebook. In the notebook, there are several loose pieces of paper. Anne looks them over and decides to hand them to Charlotte.
What?
Charlotte holds the pages to her face and reads.
Where did you get these from?
I wrote them. I changed the first few lines, like you said.
You've read these?
Yes.
Has she read any of yours?
No.
She won't let me. Don't
Charlotte
rush.
flips through the pages quickly. Charlotte flips through a few more pages.
All right.
How many did you read?
Enough.
Shouldn't you read all of them in order to
I
figure
have a good
out-
sense of what they're like.
Oh. And
I find them rather sweet.
sweet?
There's work to be done on them still.
I've been writing these for months.
Anne grabs the pages back from Charlotte.
And they're sincere, true.
I have more if you want to
Nope.
read them.
No.
Charlotte goes to her writing desk and takes out a notebook. In the notebook, there are several loose pieces of paper. She looks at her sisters and then decides to hand the pages to Emily. Emily reads. Anne rushes over to Emily and grabs some of the pages out of her hand.
Careful.
I want to see.
When did you write these?
When I was away in Brussels.
I didn't know you were writing. Not like this.
I didn't know you were writing either.
You have so many. They're strong, stoic.
I think there's work to be done on them still.
Anne,
What?
Charlotte grabs the pages from Anne.
I didn't mean it like that.
It's
Charlotte
not
grabs
that,
Anne's
Anne.
pages
It's
too.
how many have you written,
Close to 20.
Emily?
I don't know.
You must have some idea.
I haven't counted.
How many more could you write? How long would it take?
Why?
Charlotte lines the pages side by side on the floor.
Don't you see what we have?
Emily and Anne stare at her blankly.
A collection.
Of
Poetry. We can sell these.
sell?
We can sell our work. We can have these published.
You want to publish our poems?
Not all of them, but some, yes.
You think someone would want to buy what we wrote?
I do.
You think our work is strong enough?
Yes.
How would we even go about getting our work published?
We would submit it
To,
to a publisher.
we don't know any publishers.
No. But we can review the collections we have. We can submit our work to the same publishers.
What if they don't want to publish it?
Then we'll find a publisher who does. We'll send it out until someone finally agrees.
No, absolutely not.
But what you've written,
It was never meant to be shared.
we've always shared our writing with each other. How many hours have we spent in this very room on this floor, writing away for hours and hours until there wasn't a drop of ink left in the house? You, me, Anne, Bran even. And we could talk, and we would talk over and over again about publishing our work, about publishing our stories.
That was when we were children. We didn't know any better.
But what if we did? What if we knew exactly what we were?
I can't.
Emily,
Publish your work if you want, but do it without me. I don't want any part of it.
Emily heads for the door.
we could make some money.
Emily stops.
Even if we sold even a handful of copies.
Do writers even make money?
It would only be a few pounds, if that.
A few pounds will make all the difference. We've used all of Papa's salary for the year already.
We haven't had a choice.
Because we can't find work.
One of you will get a position.
Emily, we've been advertising for almost a year.
It will change. It has to.
And until then, we have this. How many books, how many articles, magazines, papers, collections have we read in our lives? We can write just as well as they can. I have the first half of a novel even.
I'm writing a novel too. So is she.
Anne,
You are. I've seen you working on it.
that's for me. That's not for public
Our work
knowledge.
deserves to be published. It deserves to be published, translated. It should be read by,
Translated?
yes, if our work were published, then it would certainly be
Into what language do you want our work translated?
in as many languages as possible. French, German.
Is that what this is about? You want him to read your work.
What? No,
Who?
This is just another way for you to try and communicate with him.
Emily.
Who are you talking about?
Even after he told you, begged you not to, after I told you not to contact him and to
Stop.
leave, well,
Why am I always the last one to know anything?
this is because of your obsessive need
Stop
to,
it.
because of your intolerable, unrelenting need to be
It's
number one in,
because I have absolutely nothing to show for my life. Every day is the exact same as the next. We wake up, we eat, we clean, we tend to Papa, we tend to the house, we sew, we read, we write, we sleep. That's it. That's all. Our entire life.
We go to church. We teach at school on Sundays.
And we go to church and we teach at school on Sundays. Yes.
I like our life, the life we have.
Because this is the only life you've ever known. You've never wanted more than this. You've barely traveled farther than
I
don't
went to
know,
school
like-
when we were young.
for a few months. Then you got sick, like you always do, and came home right away
I went to Brussels with you to study.
for a few months. And then you hurried home as quick as you could.
My life doesn't have any less meaning because I'm satisfied here.
How? How can you be satisfied?
I don't crave the sort of attention that you do.
It's not attention I crave. It's a life. I want a life.
Go then. If you're so miserable, travel or find employment somewhere else. If you want to leave so badly, then
I've
go.
tried.
No,
Every week I advertise that I'm available for work. But even if I were hired for a position, it's still the same. Taking care of other people's children, of other people's homes, each and every day, wherever we go, wherever we are. This life of ours, it's... How much time do we have left?
What?
what?
Our entire family, mama, auntie, our own sisters, everyone we have ever loved has... We're lucky to have survived this long. We are. And what do I have to show for it? I have no accomplishments to my name. I'm never going to marry.
You think you'll never marry?
I don't see how.
You were already proposed to, Charlotte, twice.
Those didn't count.
Yes, they did.
They didn't count for me. Those men didn't know me. They could barely read. I could never have any sort of real love with them. I'll never have that kind of love with anyone.
You don't know that.
I do. If those men were my best chance at marriage, then it's better to accept it and look forward. It isn't wise for a woman without any sort of beauty or fortune.
You have
To-
beauty.
Where?
You have beauty in you.
Charlotte, you're beautiful.
No.
To us, you are.
And to everyone else? I know what I am. A woman like me shouldn't make marriage the basis for her hopes and wishes. The two of you still have a chance at marriage.
Us?
Why not? You're young.
We're not that young.
You're young enough.
I won't marry. Never. Not after losing.
And you were never going to marry him.
Yes.
It was nothing more than a flirtation. There was no talk of marriage. He didn't talk to Papa about marrying you.
He intended to if he hadn't passed away.
And
If he hadn't passed, we would be together this very moment in a house of our own with a family. I was absolutely going to marry him, Charlotte. You know that.
Anne stands and then plops herself down on the rocking chair. Charlotte begins tidying the papers.
That's it?
I suppose so.
Charlotte looks at Emily.
Whatever you think will come of this, it may have no effect whatsoever on our lives. Nothing may change. And then what?
I see no harm in trying.
You have your work, Anne's work. You have more than enough to create something between the two of you.
We can't move forward without you.
If she doesn't want to be a part of it, there's no point in forcing her.
Do you want to be a part of it? Want to publish your
Yes.
private...
Yes, yes, yes. I've always wanted this.
You'd have a better chance if I'm nowhere near it.
That's not true.
It is.
We need your work.
If you're in such dire need of a third, ask Branwell. He's the one with the talent.
Oh, Emily, how can you not see it? You have a gift. Do you know how many people spend their lives searching for what you have?
What I write is strange. It's not suitable or dignified. It in no way reflects how a woman should feel, or think, or write. I know that. No one will understand it. No one will want to.
If you were a man, do you think for a moment you would choose not to pursue this?
If I were a man, I wouldn't have to choose.
Then just pretend you're a man and be done with it.
I can't pretend to be something I'm not.
Why not?
Because it's not proper.
Because it's not what?
You can. You can.
Charlotte stands, grabs paper and a quill, and begins to write.
We could keep our initials, keep the first letters for each of our names. The rest could be whatever we like.
Charlotte holds up the page for them to see.
Currer, Ellis, Aaron, Bell?
If they think we're men, they'll focus on what we write, not who we are. We can send our work without being afraid of anyone knowing. We can write what we like, how we like.
Anne grabs the page from Charlotte.
Why Bell? Why can't we use our last name?
People know there's only one son in our family.
How many people know that?
Enough.
Can't we submit anonymously?
No. Our work would be stolen, and we would have no way to prove it was ours.
Work with a name is respected far more than anything written anonymously.
Kerr, Ellis, Aaron. Mine doesn't sound nearly as intriguing as yours. Aaron. It's just so plain.
What then?
Adam, Abram, Andrew, Arthur, Alfred,
Acton.
Oh, Acton. Yes. Kerr, Ellis, Acton, Bell.
Charlotte writes the names out again, and she holds them up for them to see.
So, no one would know it was us?
No one would know it was us.
What about Papa? We would have to tell him.
Papa would go mad knowing we were trying to be published. He would get too invested. He would want to change everything we wrote.
He would edit every poem until he was satisfied.
Until he felt it was up to his standards.
And if it weren't a resounding success, he never would forgive us.
No, we don't tell him. We don't tell Branwell. It stays between the three of us.
Then, what's the point?
I won't do it if we tell people. That's the point.
But if we don't tell people, then you'll...
Emily looks at the page with their proposed names on it.
We shouldn't have to disguise who we are.
Oh, Emily. Does it really matter? It would be a few published copies of a poetry collection. That's it. That's all it is.
I don't know.
Emily, can't you at least try?
Just say yes, Emily, for goodness sake.
Emily looks at her sisters and then exhales heavily. Interlude. Charlotte, Emily, and Anne grab a small stack of blank papers and quills. They sit at the table and write. As they do, they hand each other their pages. They read one another's works. They make notes. And they hand the pages back to the author. They sit and write. Again, they hand each other their pages. They read one another's works, make notes, and hand the pages back to each other. They sit, they write. Hand each other their pages, they read one another's work, make notes, and start to form a pile in the middle of the table. The stack of paper grows, and the pages of their poetry collection. Charlotte gently picks up the pages and leaves the room. Emily and Anne grab another small stack of blank pages, and again they start to write. They share their work with each other, and they begin a stack of their own. Charlotte enters with a small book in hand and a printed copy of their poetry collection. Emily and Anne gather beside Charlotte. They look at each other together, smile, and place it on their bookshelf, and then get back to work. Charlotte grabs another small stack of blank pages and they write. They share their work with each other, and the stack of paper grows, and the pages of their novels. Charlotte collects the pages from Emily and Anne, and together they tie the piles with twine, fold an envelope out of a large sheet of paper, and seal it shut. Charlotte takes the envelope and leaves. Movement 3. It's the afternoon, 9 months later. The front door of the house is opened and then closed quickly. Anne, 27, enters the room out of breath. She wears a day dress, bonnet, and shawl. She takes out a large envelope that she was hiding under the shawl and places it on the sofa. She places the shawl on the envelope to hide it, and then she leaves the room. Emily, 28, enters with a book and teacup. She sits and reads. She is wearing a house dress.
Charlotte, Emily.
I'm
Charlotte,
here.
Emily.
Anne
What?
runs
I'm
back
in
into the
here.
room.
Oh,
Why are you so out of breath?
I ran.
The whole way?
Yes,
Anne, you shouldn't have.
it doesn't matter.
Emily hands Anne her teacup.
Here.
Anne drinks quickly.
Ooh,
It's hot.
should have told me that before I drank.
I thought you could feel how hot it was when you picked up the cup.
My tongue.
Emily takes the cup from Anne and blows on the tea.
Charlotte, where is she?
She went to town.
She should have come with me. I would have waited for her. Why didn't she come?
Emily hands the cup back to Anne.
Drink it slowly.
Anne
Where's
takes a sip.
Papa?
At the church.
And Bran?
Asleep if you didn't wake him with your shouting.
Emily notices Anne's shawl on the sofa.
Hang it up.
I will.
Now, if you don't hang it up, you'll forget about it, and then Charlotte will come home and make a big fuss.
Anne goes to the sofa. She pulls out the envelope and holds it up to Emily to see.
It's
Yes.
Emily takes the envelope and feels it.
it's lighter,
I know.
thinner.
I know.
They look at each other. Emily places the envelope on the table.
We'll open it when Charlotte returns.
When will that be?
I don't know, a couple of hours?
A couple of hours? I had to carry that all the way here, unopened. And even that took all my strength. Now you want me to wait a couple of hours? I should have opened it the moment I saw it.
No, you were right to wait until we were all together.
I can't wait for her.
Anne,
Anne moves to grab the envelope, and Emily grabs it before she can get to it.
we're going to wait.
I can't.
Anne lunges at Emily, and Emily moves out of the way.
Stop it. Be patient.
Can't we just open it?
No.
She won't even know.
Yes, she will.
What if we open it, wrap it back up again, and make it look exactly like it did before we opened it? How would she know then?
Because you're a terrible liar.
I can lie.
Not very well,
Neither can you.
which is why we're going to wait.
Why did we agree to this?
You were the one who insisted.
No.
Yes, you insisted that if we received any sort of correspondence about our work, we'd open it together.
Well, if I propose the idea, can't I be the one to change it?
No, we submitted our novels together. We opened the responses together.
This is more painful than waiting to hear about our poetry collection.
Leave it.
Now what am I supposed to do?
Try sitting.
Emily goes back to her book.
Why don't you do something while you sit?
I can't do anything.
Try.
Anne grabs the book. She flips through the pages, never taking her eyes off the envelope. She flips through the book faster and faster until finally,
I can't.
Anne drops the book and heads for the table. Emily makes it to the envelope before Anne does.
Give it to me.
Anne chases Emily around the table.
You shouldn't run.
I don't care. Give it to me.
Anne!
Give it.
Anne grabs the envelope from Emily. Emily sticks the envelope in her skirt and holds it between her legs.
You think that's going to stop me?
I should hope so.
Anne chases after Emily, and Emily takes the envelope out from her skirt and runs. She drops the envelope on the floor. Anne nearly grabs it, but Emily picks it up before she can.
Emily!
Anne!
Please! Every other envelope had all 3 novels sent back to us. This one is thinner. What does that mean?
It can mean all sorts of things. A publisher spilled on one of the manuscripts. They destroyed it, and
Destroyed? Those are our only copies.
we won't know until
Charlotte would have opened it already. You know she would have. If she saw how much thinner it was, she would have opened it without a moment's hesitation.
Well, we're not Charlotte.
What if it's a positive response? She wouldn't be upset with us for opening it if it's a positive response.
And if it isn't?
Then she'll be so distracted by her grief that she'll forget that we opened it in the first place.
Emily places the envelope on the table, and Anne moves towards her.
Don't.
Anne backs away.
This is painful.
They hear stumbling in the hallway. They look at each other. Emily and Anne go to the door.
I thought Papa was going to watch him today.
Papa was called to church.
He couldn't have taken Bran with him.
No,
I don't like being alone in the house with him.
he's been quiet today. I've hardly seen him.
What? No fit of despair?
No, not yet.
They hear from the front door to the house is open and close again. Emily and Anne go to the window.
Now where is he going?
You know where he's going, to a pub.
Which pub?
Whichever one will still serve him.
Did you hear the way he yelled at Papa when he refused to give him more money? Papa, of all people.
When a man wants to drink, he'll stop at nothing.
Emily, what would have happened if you hadn't been here when he...
It's best not to think about it.
I can't help it. What if something awful happened to Bran? To you?
It didn't.
But it could have. You could have been burnt. Or worse.
I wasn't. We got out of the house in time.
Still, what was he thinking? Lighting his bed on fire? How cruel does one have to be to do something so?
And he was trying to take his own life.
Don't say that.
When I found him in his room, he was on the floor. He fainted from the smoke. I bent down to lift him up. When he came to, he begged me to leave him there, alone. He begged me to.
He has no right to put us through this, to put Papa through.
He has nothing left to live for.
He has plenty to live for.
He feels as if he has nothing to live for.
Why? Because she finally wrote to say they were never going to be together?
Yes. When her husband died, Bran started to believe that perhaps they would marry after all.
She was never going to marry him. Why did Charlotte go to town?
I'm not sure.
Yes, you are.
If she wants you to know, she'll tell you herself.
No, she won't. Is she all right?
She's fine.
Then why can't you tell me why she went?
It's not my business to tell.
She tells you everything.
She doesn't tell me everything.
Charlotte tells you everything, and the two of you never bother to include me or ask me or even
She's
think.
seeing the doctor about her eyes, her sight. It's getting worse.
Are her eyes as bad as Papa's were?
She doesn't know.
It took us over a year to save enough for him to have his surgery, and we still had to use our inheritance. We can't afford for her to have the same procedure. We've already sold everything we could. We can't.
She doesn't know. Don't say anything to her. She's so sensitive about these sorts of things.
She's sensitive about everything. What if they said no?
Then Charlotte will send it to the next publisher on the list.
And when we reach the end of the list, then what?
Anne picks up the envelope.
It isn't right.
Emily shoots her a look. Anne drops the envelope as if surrendering.
The fact that she's using the same envelope every time she sends our novels out. She shouldn't be crossing out their names like this.
It's just an envelope.
Emily, these sorts of things mean something. Anytime our package is sent to a publisher, they can see who else has rejected us. We should have used a new envelope every time. And
we can't afford a new envelope every time. We want to send it to another publisher.
Don't you think that if someone saw the number of names crossed out, it would alter the perception of our worth? If I saw that 6 other publishers had already rejected these novels, I know what
that may have had no impact on the responses we've received so far.
Then why has no one wanted to publish our novels yet?
I don't know.
The same publisher that published our poems should be the one to publish
They
our
don't publish novels.
Well, they should. They were pleased with how our collection was received. Why shouldn't they consider?
They weren't pleased.
Yes.
And we only sold 2 copies out of 1,000.
2 is better than nothing, and the reviews were positive. Yours especially. You received more praise than Charlotte and I combined.
We were reviewed by 3 people.
Well, it isn't a good year for poetry.
It's never a good year for poetry.
Do you think it's mine? It felt about the weight of mine.
You don't know how much your novel weighs.
It isn't much thicker than that.
Neither is mine.
Emily picks up the envelope to feel the weight of it.
This isn't yours.
It could be. The title of my novel alone.
You have a fine title.
Not as fine as yours. Wuthering Heights has such.
It's only a title.
Titles mean everything. Agnes Grey, it's dull.
It's the name of your main character. Many titles are the name of the main character.
It's too simple.
Charlotte's title is just as simple. The professor? That's not commanding or
My novel is the
debonair.
weakest of the three.
You can't think like that.
What if I'm not a writer?
Anne, do you write?
Yes.
Then you're a writer. You spend more time writing than either Charlotte or I do.
Only in an attempt to be as good as you.
Anne, you are good.
But I don't want to be good. I want to be great.
You are great.
You said good.
Anne, it doesn't mean
It
that...
means everything to me. It means, what if I'm never... It's torture.
It's torture for all of us.
Not for you. Every time we receive a rejection, you seem fine. Relieved even. Doesn't it hurt to know that someone doesn't want to publish your work?
Yes, it's unbearable. It's agony.
You don't show it.
Maybe I'm a better liar than you think.
What if it never happens for us?
They look at each other. Anne pulls a letter from her jacket and hands it to Emily to read.
They have 3 children, all girls, all under the age of 5. They would need me for a few years, at least. They want me to start in a month.
When did you get this?
Today. It arrived with the envelope.
This is the first response you've received in over a year.
I know.
Are you going to write to them?
Should I?
I didn't know you were still advertising for a position. Charlotte gave up months ago.
I kept posting, just in case.
Anne. Oh, Anne.
Emily, if it's mine, if my novel is the one that... I can't keep going on like this. It might be time for me to be sent this letter on the same day we received another rejection.
We don't know what's in there.
One of our novels is in there.
And it might very well be mine.
It won't be.
We won't know until we
Every
open
time
it.
we're rejected, I wonder if it's me that's holding us back. If we had submitted our novels separately, yours would have already been published.
That's not true.
Yes.
Anne.
I want to be like you, like Charlotte. I want it so badly. Sometimes I can't stand to look at you or be in the same room as you. Every time our work is rejected, I torment myself thinking that if only I were as good as you.
You are.
It's too much. All of this. It's too...
You can't give up.
I have to. I can't.
The front door of the house is opened and then closed quickly. Emily and Anne look at each other. Charlotte, 31, opens the door. She's wearing a day dress, and she immediately sees Anne's shawl on the sofa.
Put it away.
Never mind the shawl.
Anne,
We've got...
put it away.
Anne holds an envelope up for Charlotte to see.
It's thinner.
Yes.
You didn't open it?
Emily wouldn't let me.
We were waiting for you.
You should have opened it.
I told you.
We agreed to open them together.
Open it. Open it this very moment.
It's so thin. What does it mean?
It means we need to open it.
Charlotte hands the envelope to Emily.
You.
Me?
Emily, open it.
Emily opens the envelope and takes out a letter and reads it to herself.
What?
Emily reads.
What does it say?
No.
Emily, what?
No as in...
As in they've declined to publish our novels.
All of them?
Yes.
Well, that can't be.
Charlotte moves towards Emily. Emily grabs the contents of the envelope before Charlotte can get to it.
What did they send back?
It doesn't matter.
What did they send in the envelope?
Read us the letter.
I told you what it says.
I want to hear it.
What did they send?
Anne rushes to Emily and tries to grab the envelope from her.
Give it to me.
Enough.
I have to know this very moment.
Stop. You're acting like a child.
Emily, give it to her.
Anne tries to wrestle the letter from Emily. Emily pushes Anne away and rips the letter into little pieces.
No!
Anne runs to pick up the pieces of the letter from the floor.
Why would you do that?
What's come over you?
You wouldn't listen.
Charlotte looks at Emily.
Give it to me.
No.
We have every right to see.
Charlotte follows Emily.
Enough.
Hold her.
Don't touch me.
Anne holds Emily from behind. Charlotte tries to wrestle the package away from Emily. They struggle, and it brings them to the floor. Emily bites Charlotte's hand.
Ow! You broke skin.
Satisfied?
No.
Charlotte lunges at Emily. Emily moves away, and Anne grabs the envelope out of her hand.
Ha!
Give it here.
No.
Anne, give it to me, or I swear I'll...
All right. All right.
Anne hands the envelope to Charlotte, and Charlotte opens it.
What? What is it?
Charlotte.
Charlotte reads. Charlotte reads.
Charlotte.
Charlotte looks at Emily. Charlotte hurls the package to the floor and has thrown the door open and runs out of the room. Anne looks at the pages on the floor.
They sent back hers? The professor? They want to publish ours? Yours and mine?
Anne heads for the door.
Don't.
We should go to her. She shouldn't be alone.
Anne, leave her. She needs time.
Slamming door could be heard from upstairs. Emily and Anne look at each other. Interlude. Emily and Anne tidy the room. Books are added to the back onto the shelf, and new cushions replace older ones on the sofa. New quills or replace the older ones on the table. Charlotte enters with a stack of blank pages. She sits, and at one of the tables she writes ferociously. As she completes a page, she creates a stack in front of her. She is writing her next novel. When her stack is large enough, Charlotte grabs the pages and leaves. Emily and Anne watch her and then leave. Charlotte enters with a book in hand, printed copy of her novel, and Charlotte places it on the bookshelf. She reaches for a stack of newspapers and sits at the table and reads. Movement 4. It's the evening, 14 months later. Charlotte, 32, sits at a table reading from a stack of newspapers. She is dressed for bed.
Charlotte?
Charlotte starts to tidy the papers on the table.
Charlotte?
Coming.
Charlotte finishes with the paper and leaves the room. Emily, 30, enters, dressed for bed. She goes to the bookshelf and grabs the Bible. As she heads for the door, she stops. She takes a moment for herself and sits at the table. She notices a stack of newspapers and starts to read them. Anne, 28, peeks her head into the room. She's carrying a basin and cloth, and she is also dressed for bed. Emily tidies the newspapers.
What are those?
Nothing. Here.
Emily hands Anne the Bible.
Take this to Papa.
In her throat and coughs.
What are you doing with those?
Go. Papa needs it.
Bran's been refusing for weeks to let Papa bless him.
Well, he's finally agreed.
A lot of good it'll do him now.
It might. 3 days ago, he was strong enough to be in town.
He's fading. Charlotte can't even look at him. He keeps reaching his hand out to touch her from bed. She just stands in the doorway, staring back at him. I think we should tell him, Bran,
Tell him what?
about our work, about our novels.
Why?
I don't want him to pass without knowing.
It's too early to know if he's going to pass or not.
He's fading.
Charlotte enters the room and she covers her mouth.
The air in that room. We shouldn't be in there.
We can't leave Papa alone with him.
We could catch it.
So could Papa.
The doctor said it might only be a cold.
You don't cough up blood with a cold.
Whatever it is, we shouldn't be in there.
Charlotte,
What?
Nothing. We were going up.
Emily goes to leave.
I want to tell him.
Anne,
I do. I want to tell Bran about our work.
now's not the time to decide that.
Now's exactly the time. If he passes tonight,
He might not pass.
but if he does, then we'll have kept this entire thing from him. He should know.
Why?
He's our brother. I don't want secrets between us in what might be his final hours.
Because he hasn't kept secrets from us.
I don't care. I want him to know.
So do I.
Both of you?
Yes. Why wouldn't we tell him?
We agreed that we wouldn't say anything to anyone about what we've done under any circumstances.
It's just Bran. Who would he tell? He's not seeing any visitors.
And no one is supposed to know.
But think of how it would make him feel to learn about what we've accomplished.
Bran is in no state to. He can't see straight. He can't think straight. He can't even tell the three of us apart. Now is not the time to reveal.
It would bring him comfort. Papa was reading to him earlier tonight. Imagine reading to him from one of our novels.
You can't stand to be in the same room as Bran. Now you want to remind him of all the things he hasn't done with his life?
No. Sharing our work with him, with Papa, would.
With Papa. You want to tell.
Well, if we're telling Bran, we have to tell Papa.
Emily looks at Charlotte and Anne.
You've talked about this?
No,
You've spoken about this without me.
no, Emily, it was only an idea.
How long have you had this idea for?
Not long, but seeing him in bed with no color in his cheeks, he looks so thin.
And you?
What?
How long have you wanted to tell Bran? Tell Papa about our
Emily,
going.
you're overreacting.
How long?
What does it matter?
I want to know why you're breaking a promise that we made to each other.
I'm not breaking a promise. If I were, I would have told them already.
But you want to?
Yes, Emily, I want my own father and brother to know what we've done, what we've achieved. Did you honestly think we would never tell anyone?
Yes, Charlotte. That was the only reason I ever agreed to this.
And
I
if we
knew-
changed our minds, the two of us shouldn't be punished for wanting them to know.
No one is punishing you, Charlotte.
You are, by having a fit at even the thought.
Do you have any idea?
Emily
What it's
lunges
like-
towards Charlotte and Anne stops her.
Emily, don't.
Do you not see what it's been like for us?
We should go upstairs.
Why we might not want Papa or Bran to know?
Papa would be proud. They both would be.
They would be proud of you, Charlotte. You're the one being sent letters of praise from readers, from other authors. You're the one invited to make appearances. You're the one receiving glowing reviews. But we
Tonight
barely
is
get a...
not the night.
Do you have any idea how dreadful these past few months have been?
Views, Emily.
One positive review. The rest were completely and utterly derogatory and insulting, and it didn't take any time for you. The moment Jane Eyre was published, the moment it was released,
You know, you might still receive the same sort of reviews.
I won't. We won't, Anne. You know that.
I don't know that. I just hope the two of us can.
The two of you can have the same sort of...
Why would
Emily
you
goes
bring
to the
these
table.
here?
She grabs the newspapers and drops them in front of Charlotte.
Why would you bring these here? Charlotte? Why would you bring...
I asked for the latest round of reviews to be sent to me.
The three of us agreed not to have any more reviews in the house.
Well, you weren't supposed to read them.
You left them here, out in the open. Why wouldn't you take them to your room if you didn't want us to
I
read
didn't
them?
have time to put them away, and I certainly didn't leave them out for you to find.
Have you read them? Charlotte? Have you or have you not read them?
I glanced at them.
Glanced.
Yes.
Sit.
Emily,
Sit.
this isn't...
Charlotte sits.
Emily,
Emily looks through the pile of newspaper clippings.
Heathcliff, as depicted by the deranged Ellis Bell, is a deformed monster. This is a bad novel indeed.
Emily picks up another review.
If this book is the first work of the author, we hope that he doesn't produce a second or third novel. We hope, both for his sake and ours, that he never attempts at writing another novel again.
Emily picks up another review.
We come from reading of Wuthering Heights as if we had come fresh from a pest house. Read Jane Eyre, burn Wuthering Heights.
Charlotte chuckles.
This is amusing to you?
You can't take those seriously. Most of them are so poorly written. You can't take it to heart.
How can I not when I've put all of my heart into it? They've destroyed the very thing that I've...
It
worked
hasn't
so
been
hard-
destroyed.
Burn Wuthering Heights?
You have to have a thicker skin if you're going to continue.
I can't continue.
Emily, you have to.
Why? So I can be humiliated again and again? I would never have done any of this if it hadn't been for you.
Yes, you were perfectly prepared to spend the rest of your life wasting your time, your talent.
You're the only ones who seem to think I have any talent.
It was your first attempt. A first novel is difficult. So much of what you wrote is commendable. But there was...
What? There was what?
I told you there would be no sympathy for Heathcliff. I told you not to depict him as such a...
Such a what? A what, Charlotte?
Such... I gave you my thoughts.
Your thoughts were to change everything I'd written.
I told you to make some adjustments.
And if only I had listened to you, then none of this would have happened. Is that it?
You might have been more satisfied with what you wrote if you...
I was. I was satisfied.
Emily,
Enough. Both of you.
Anne goes to the papers, collects them, and as she does, she reads.
She's the one making this harder for herself. It's a privilege to have your work reviewed at all, to have created something worthy of...
These are terrible.
Thank you, Anne. They're utterly and completely
There's
awful.
hardly any mention of me in these. And Agnes Grey, written by the lackluster Acton Bell, leaves no impression at all. That's it. That's all there is. They're all about Emily. We published our novels together. Why wouldn't they write as much about my work as they did about hers?
I'd rather leave no impression than be considered deranged or
I
a
wouldn't.
madman.
I want them to talk about me, about my work.
And if they're saying monstrous things?
That's better than being forgotten or compared to you.
Well, they compare me to her, so we're
And they compare
both in
me to everyone else. It doesn't matter what they say.
You can only say that because the reviews you got were
Not
absolutely...
every review I got was positive.
Yes.
Almost every single one you got.
If your work received an ounce of the criticism mine has, we'd be spending weeks picking you up off this very floor. I know why you want Papa and Bran to, but for me, for us, if Papa knew how poorly it had been received.
You don't think Papa might form his own opinions about your work?
I don't want him to have any opinions about it at all.
Should I get some tea?
Emily shakes her head.
Are you sure?
Yes.
People need to know what we've done. There's already too much confusion around the entire...
What confusion?
Charlotte goes to her writing desk and takes out a letter.
Your idiotic publisher has been claiming that Jane Eyre and Agnes Grey were written by the same author, by the same man.
What? They think
Anne
you
grabs
wrote
the letter
Agnes
out of
Grey.
Charlotte's hand.
They're saying that I wrote...
But you didn't. You didn't write my novel.
I know. I am perfectly aware that I didn't write your novel, Anne. I'm not saying that I did, but your publisher is. And now my publisher is furious. This has gone on long enough. People need to know the truth.
What truth?
That we're women. That there are 3 of us. That we're sisters. And that we've each written our own novels.
Yes. This needs to be resolved right away. I don't want this hanging over our heads when I publish my next book.
Your next what?
I've been writing a second novel.
So have I.
You have?
We should go in person to prove who we are, who we say we are.
Yes, all 3 of us should go.
That was never part of the plan. It was never, ever.
They hear a noise from above. They hear their father sobbing. They look at each other silently, negotiating who should go upstairs. Finally,
I'll go.
Anne grabs the Bible and leaves.
Emily?
It's changing. Changed.
What?
My life. Our lives.
Charlotte sits near Emily.
Can you not be happy for me?
I am. Of course I am.
Then?
You've outdone us.
Emily lays her head in Charlotte's lap. Anne enters.
What?
He's gone.
What?
Bran,
They look at each other.
Papa is asking for you.
I can go.
He asked for Charlotte.
Charlotte goes to the door. She looks back at her sisters and leaves.
Emily?
Emily coughs to
Emily?
the point of not being able to stand up.
Emily?
Anne goes to Emily. Emily covers her mouth with a cloth, and when she pulls it away, she reveals blood.
No, 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 no.
Emily's coughing becomes uncontrollable, and Anne tries to comfort her.
Charlotte! Charlotte!
Anne holds Emily tightly.
Charlotte.
Interlude. Anne tries to pick Emily up, but struggles. Charlotte enters, and together they lead Emily out of the room. The room is empty for a moment. Charlotte enters and carries a few crates filled with books. She puts the crate on the table and then leaves the room. Anne enters. She is also carrying a crate filled with books. She puts her crate on the table and then leaves the room. Charlotte enters again and begins to organize the room. Anne enters carrying a tray with a teapot and 2 teacups on it and puts it on the table. Anne sits in the rocking chair and begins to sew, and Charlotte continues to organize the room. Movement 5. It's evening, 4 months later. Charlotte, 32, organizes books on the bookshelf. She is wearing glasses now. Anne, 28, sits in her rocking chair with a shawl wrapped around her, and she's repairing a skirt. They are both dressed for bed. Anne stands and pours some tea. She moves slowly. She hands Charlotte her cup, and Charlotte takes a sip and makes a face.
It's strong. It's strong.
Do you want me to make you another?
No, it's fine.
Anne takes the cup and sips. She sits in the rocking chair, and she has a tickle in her throat. She tries to clear it, and Charlotte watches Anne closely.
You don't have to do that. I can buy a new one.
I'm almost done.
Charlotte puts some books on the shelf.
Why don't you finish that tomorrow?
I want to finish tonight.
Charlotte moves some books and accidentally knocks them over.
I thought your glasses are supposed to help.
They are helping.
Charlotte collects the books off the floor, and Anne stands to help her.
Anne, don't.
I can do it.
I don't want you wearing yourself out.
What are we supposed to do with all of these?
Read them.
We don't have space for all of them.
We can put some in Papa's study, some in Emily's.
It was kind of your publisher to send these for her.
She didn't have time to read a single one.
Anne notices an envelope tucked into one of the crates. She opens it. Inside is a poster that she unfolds.
Jane Eyre? As a play? You didn't tell us about this. Why didn't you go?
It was last month.
You could have gone.
No, I couldn't.
Charlotte grabs the poster out of Anne's hands.
Papa wants us to go through her room. Decide what to keep, what to give away. We need to change the sheets. Throw out her clothes.
Throw them out?
You can keep what you'd like. Anything else we can give away.
What about her bed?
Well, I assumed you would use it.
Why?
Well, you'll take her room, won't you?
No.
Well, you should. You've been sleeping in Branwell's studio for years now. That's hardly a bedroom.
That room is hers.
And you can have it. She would want you to.
I couldn't.
Well, either way, we need to clean it out.
Can't we wait? It feels too soon to... We waited months before deciding what to do about brands.
It will only get harder the longer we. I can do it without you if you want. I just thought you would want to be.
I do. I just. Sometimes I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
You stay busy.
Charlotte puts the last pile of books on the shelf.
That's the last of them.
She takes off her glasses and rubs her eyes.
Are you tired?
No. Are you?
No.
You should be in bed.
I want to be here.
Anne sits back in the rocking chair.
I've nearly finished the skirt.
You didn't have to do that.
I know. Will you read?
I might.
Have you written?
No.
Will you?
I'm not sure.
Charlotte notices Emily's writing desk. She goes to the desk and begins to search through it. As she does, she finds something tucked away in the back. She pulls it out, a few pieces of paper, newspaper clippings.
Did you know she kept these?
What?
Charlotte brings the clippings to Anne.
No. Did you?
No.
These are some of the worst ones.
Charlotte grabs the clippings from Anne as if to rip them.
Don't.
I don't want these in the house.
They were hers. She cut them herself.
That's not a reason to. The way you would get newspapers for her, the two of you sitting together day after day.
I wanted her to read the positive reviews when they finally came out.
It didn't matter that they were positive. She kept reading the scathing ones instead. She practically had them memorized.
You can't blame us for wanting to know how our work was received. We weren't getting letters and invitations like you were. Other than our reviews, we had no way of knowing what people thought of our work.
She became obsessed with them. She should have focused on writing another novel. She allowed herself to become completely crippled.
It was
by.
hard.
It's been hard for all of us. All of this.
Charlotte looks at the clippings and thinks about destroying them.
Don't.
Charlotte puts them back into Emily's writing desk and she picks up Emily's quill.
You should use it.
No.
Charlotte puts the quill away.
You haven't written in weeks.
Anne, I'm fine.
She would want you to write, to keep going with every.
Charlotte closes her eyes.
I can help.
I can help, you know. You can read me your pages like we used to. You might feel better. You might feel more at ease if you just.
I won't feel. It's getting late. It's time for bed.
No.
Yes, you need to rest.
I want to talk.
There's nothing to discuss.
There is. If it had been me, if I had been the one who passed.
Oh,
would.
Anne!
Let me finish. If I had been the one who passed and Emily was here, would you speak to her about your work? About your.
I don't know.
I think you would.
I have no way of knowing what Emily and I would be speaking about.
You never talk to me about your work.
I do.
When it was the three of us, you would always talk to her. It was like it was only the two of you in the room together.
It's not true.
It was Emily you wanted to have join you in Brussels, even though she hated being away from home. She didn't even stay to complete her studies. I would have stayed. I would have graduated.
We only had enough money for two of us to go.
You wanted Emily to be part of our collection. You wanted her poems.
I wanted us to publish our work together.
You asked me to make all sorts of changes to mine.
We all suggested changes to each other, Anne.
And if I hadn't shown you my novel, if I hadn't forced you to read Agnes Grey,
You didn't force me.
would you have even asked me to publish it?
Yes.
But you never.
Anne, what is it?
You've never had anything kind to say about my work, about my poetry, my novels.
It wasn't about being kind. It was about trying to improve what we were all.
You were always the hardest on me. When we shared our work, you would criticize me the most.
I was being constructive.
You've never hidden how you feel about my work.
I trusted you could hear my concerns without harboring endless amounts of.
You don't like my work. You never have.
Your style is not to my liking. That doesn't mean your work isn't. You might not like everything I write either.
But I do. I love Jane Eyre.
And in time, I think you'll find a story that's. You need more time.
Time?
Yes. It takes time to.
I've had 2 novels published in the time you've only had 1.
Yes. And you've never wasted an opportunity to remind me of that.
Wildfell Hall has sold as many copies as when Jane Eyre was first.
It hasn't sold as many copies.
Nearly. And Helen is a heroine loved just as much as Jane. Maybe even more. Reviews praised that book.
And I don't have to agree with every.
You couldn't even get your first novel published. No one wanted to publish The Professor. They still don't.
It's a difficult novel to sell.
Well, it's a difficult novel to read, too.
Are you finished?
You're not better than I am, Charlotte.
I never said I was.
You've always acted as if you were.
I'm not going to show you or your work any sort of favoritism simply because you're my sister.
Emily would never treat me the way that you.
Emily and I are not the same.
No, you most certainly are not.
Well, maybe you'd be better off if she were here instead of me.
What?
Well, you were always closer to her. I know that. If you were given the choice, I know that you would choose to have her here instead of me.
I could say the same thing about you, couldn't I?
I think it's probably best if we.
Charlotte heads for the door.
I miss her.
Charlotte stops.
I miss her so much. Sometimes I can't breathe. I find myself talking to her. I talk to her all the time. As soon as I wake up in the morning, when I'm laying in bed at night, when I'm out walking, any thought that comes into my head, I want to tell her. I want her to know. Where do I put it?
What?
Her. Where do I put her? The feeling of her. I can feel her on my skin, the smell of her. I hear her voice. I want to keep her so close to me, fit her inside my chest and just. I don't know what I'm supposed to.
Neither do I.
I wasn't ready.
Of course not.
I know, but. And now? Did we do this to her?
No, and she was sick. Very, very sick.
I know, but did we cause it?
No.
Did we make it worse?
How could we have possibly made it?
When we went to London, she begged us not to go. For weeks, she begged us not to.
We had to.
Did we?
Yes.
But if we had just sent a letter explaining instead of going in person, instead of leaving her.
It was
for all
too
years.
important to send a letter.
Emily wouldn't even speak to us when we returned. The idea of anyone knowing who we are.
Only our publishers know.
And Papa.
And Papa. We couldn't keep it from him any longer, but that's all.
Still, it was enough to make her sick about it.
She was sick long before we went to London.
But when we returned, she never recovered. And she hated me.
She didn't hate you.
It was never the same between us.
Anne.
The hardest part is that I had a glorious time on that visit in London. Even now, saying that out loud feels like a complete and utter betrayal. Do you remember the opera?
Yes.
I'd never seen so many people in one place. I've thought about that night over and over again. Once, I was sitting with her. She was in bed. Her breathing was heavy. She asked me what I was thinking about, and in that moment, I was thinking about the costumes, the singing. I didn't have the heart to tell her. So I said I was thinking about sewing. But I wasn't. I was thinking about that night, about the opera.
I think about it too.
Do you?
Yes.
You don't wish that Emily had gone with you on that trip instead of me?
No. And Emily couldn't have traveled in her condition, even if she could. Pfft. Can you imagine her in London?
She would have been a disaster.
She would have panicked the whole trip.
She wouldn't have left the hotel.
She would have been angry with us for going out, for being entertained, for enjoying ourselves.
She would have been miserable.
The entire trip. Yes.
I'd like to go away again.
Oh, yes?
Yes.
Where would you like to go?
To the seaside. I went for a weekend when I worked for the Inghams. It was beautiful. The sand was so white. The sunset was warm. The water stretched on for miles and miles.
Anne closes her eyes.
I want to feel the air in my lungs, feel the breeze on my face.
Anne opens her eyes.
I'm gonna go.
We'll see.
I don't need your permission.
And I don't need you going there and making yourself. We will see if you're well enough to go.
Even if I'm not. I want to be by the water. Even if it's the last time. Will you come?
Who, me?
Yes, you.
You would want me to come?
Maybe. If you behave.
I always behave.
No, not always.
They look at each other and smile.
Mr. Nichols was here today. I heard him asking Papa if you were home. I think he fancies you.
I'm sure Papa would be thrilled with that.
Why wouldn't he be? He seems gentle, kind. He's smart.
He's Papa's curate.
So, I've seen you talking with him.
When have you seen that?
He's walked you home from church. He always lingers around the house to talk to you after he's done with Papa.
He's nice. Friendly.
Suppose it doesn't hurt that he's handsome.
He's not that handsome.
Oh, yes, he is.
Anne looks at her and smiles.
What?
I like the idea of you getting married.
Come now. No one said anything about marriage.
I don't want you to be alone.
I'm not alone.
I know. I want you to have someone who can take care of you after I don't want you to be here alone.
Anne has a tickle in her throat and she tries to clear it. Charlotte looks at her.
Come. I'll make you some warm milk with honey.
You haven't made that in ages.
It'll be a little treat.
Charlotte offers Anne her hand.
Will you read to me?
Read?
I love hearing you read.
What would you like to hear?
Anne stands.
Something new. Something of yours.
They walk towards the door.
Maybe I'll read you something from Shirley.
Shirley.
I think it's the title of my next novel.
Is Shirley the main character?
Yes.
What's she like?
Well, she's stubborn, difficult, quick.
Oh, so like Emily.
Yes. Like Emily.
Anne turns around.
What?
Anne looks at the room as if to say goodbye.
Come.
Charlotte kisses Anne's hand and then leads her out of the room. Postlude. Charlotte enters the room. She's dressed in black, morning wear. She sits at the rocking chair, feeling the arms of it. She stands and walks to the window and looks out. She looks around the room and then hears the silence of the house. Charlotte tears up. She weeps. She covers her mouth with her father's so her father doesn't hear. She finally begins to calm herself and wipe her eyes with her sleeve. She goes to the table and opens the writing desk. She pulls out a paper and sits. She tries to steady her breathing. She stares at the blank page for a moment and then reaches for a quill. She looks up. Emily and Anne are now in the room. Emily looks up at Charlotte and then to Anne, and the three sisters look at each other, and Charlotte is overcome by the memory of them. Charlotte returns to her work. She looks up again as if to say something, but Emily and Anne are gone. Charlotte looks at the paper in front of her and breathes heavily. And very slowly, she begins to write. End of play.
Yay!
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Wade, for reading stage directions for us. Thank you, Davin and Natasha, for your wonderful readings. That was lovely. And thanks all of you for watching. Also, thank you to our tech support, David Banks and Andrew McHewitt. Thank you so much. That was really lovely. So for those of you who didn't hear at the beginning, this is one of our Thursday virtual variety nights that we're doing here at GPLT. So tune in next week, Thursday, for theater sports. If you are interested in participating, please email GPLT at youth.office@gplt.ca or call 780-538-1616 or send us a message on Facebook. We would love to get lots of participants. So send those messages right away. And then later this month, we will have a youth night. And then after that, we will do a singer-songwriter night. So, and that's on the 29th. So, and the 22nd is the youth night, and next week's the 15th, and that's theater sports. So we're so excited to see you guys again. Thanks again for everyone. That's a wrap.